Welcome to the Nordic Mythology Podcast. I'm Daniel Farron, corner of the company Horns of Odin, and I'm joined, as always, by Dr. Mathias Nordvig.
Hello, everybody. This time we're joined by Dr. Jenny Butler, who is a folklorist and also a leading authority on the academic study of contemporary paganism in an Irish context in Ireland. Jenny is a lecturer at the Department of the Study of Religions at the University College Cork. So thank you very much for joining us, Jenny.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you for taking time. I have to say, you have my ultimate favorite accent of any human being. I love the Southern Irish accent. We had Ben Mudge on a few weeks ago, who's from Belfast, and I guess to most people maybe they won't hear the difference, but I do particularly like the Dublin kind of area.
I'm from Dublin, but I live in Cork, but I am from Dublin, so you guessed that very well.
Well, I must just have an ear for the accent, I guess. No, so we're here, I guess, mainly to talk about your speciality is on paganism in Ireland, or Irish contemporary paganism. So I guess I'd like to start right off the bat with what modern paganism is, because I guess most people are. So I mean, we've been doing this at the podcast for a while now. We've spoken about these topics quite often, so my opinion's probably changed a little bit on it, or my understanding of it. Well, every podcast could possibly be somebody's first podcast. So because when you think of pagan, you automatically think of something quite old-fashioned. And I think in most senses, a lot of people think of something that's maybe even died out and doesn't, certainly if you don't exist in this circle, something that maybe has even died out. So I guess let's just start with what contemporary paganism is.
Sure. So contemporary paganism is this general category for lots of different types of religiosity. So academics describe this type of religiosity as maybe magical religion or polytheistic religion, or depending on the scholar, some describe it as New Age or as overlapping with that. There are some overlaps, but I would make a distinction between contemporary paganism and New Age forms of religion. So it's like a general term for traditions or types or paths of paganism in the modern day, including Druidry, Wicca, types of Nordic paganism, heathenism, also neo-shamanism or contemporary shamanism. So I try to avoid saying neo-paganism because this was introduced by academics to distinguish, ancient forms of religion from the modern day movement. But because some academics have used it in quite a pejorative way to kind of dismiss this modern movement, I tend not to use it, because of paganism, a lot of people don't like the term neo-pagan because they think it's academics trying to undermine them or suggest that this is not an authentic cultural or religious thing, or that it's not serious. So I try to use contemporary paganism as the term. So it's variously defined. But as you mentioned, Dan, people associate the word pagan with something maybe old-fashioned or something from the past, and it's a reconnection. It's modern people connecting spiritually with ancient forms of religion, older forms of folk religion as well. So sometimes there are more recent things that people connect with, like customs and traditions from, maybe 18th, 19th, early 20th century. So lots of different things come in to practices.
You said that there's you make a distinction between New Age and these contemporary pagan movements. What is the distinction? Like, where do we find like the distinct differences, so to speak?
I would say that contemporary paganism is a nature-based form of religiosity that directly connects with the old gods, or the so-called old religion of Europe, which has some so-called New Age characteristics. So, for example, things like some types of healing methods. Pagans might be, they might engage with things like crystal healing, things we might, talk about energies, and also be influenced by Eastern religions, concepts from Hinduism and Buddhism, and so on. And those things, they're this influence of the East and on the West, there's problems with those terms are problematic, but that kind of influence is often described as New Age. But the distinction I would make, I think New Age, in a more kind of technical way of categorizing it, is about the dawning of a new age, where consciousness on the planet will change, and it's also quite influenced by Christian ideas. So that's the distinction I would make. Contemporary paganism connects with the so-called old religion of Europe, mostly. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, and personally, as somebody who also researches this stuff, I would very much agree with you that is definitely one of the main distinctions, right?
Yeah. Okay, so I think I'm understanding. so paganism would be a kind of I guess an umbrella term for a bunch of religions within it. Because that's been one thing that's always kind of confused me, because you always hear these terms used like heathen, true, pagan, but I've kind of always just heard them but never truly understood the difference between them all. So that kind of now makes it clear as a pagan. Now I guess in an original sense, hundreds of years ago, a pagan, I guess, is it just, that would have been anybody who doesn't follow one of the Abrahamic, like the main three religions? Would that be the correct kind of?
Yeah, well, it's the original context in which the word pagan or pagani was used is said to be the Romans, when they were describing people on the hinterlands who took longer to convert to Christianity, who might have been following the old ways, that it had an association almost like a country bump, this kind of a more kind of dismissive term. Okay. And this, so literally pagani is country dweller. So the modern movement, it's a reclaiming of the word pagan or pagani as country dweller. So the literal meaning of the word, that it's to do with the spiritual connection to nature, or veneration of nature itself, or deities, whatever way that's interpreted. So there's different words that are reclaimed within paganism. Yeah.
So I guess originally it would have been quite a negative term.
Yeah. And then it took on, as you mentioned, like this idea that somebody who's pagan is not part of one of the Abrahamic faiths. So this is also, it took on this connotation. And of course, if someone is a practitioner following the old gods, they're not following a monotheistic tradition. So in Ireland, historically and still today, you get this meaning of pagan as somebody who has no religion, or who is antagonistic to Christianity. So, Catholic clergy, for example, used these terms pagan and heathen synonymously to mean someone who was, maybe an atheist, or wasn't going to mass, or whatever. So yeah, it has that association.
Then of course we also have the internal demonizations of different versions of Christianity, or between Christians and Muslims too, right? And calling each other pagan for different reasons, and all that stuff too. That I don't know if this also occurs. I believe it probably does outside of Scandinavia, but in Scandinavia we also have like a tendency to use the term around people who are gluttonous. That was especially a thing back in the 19th century and early 20th century. And I think there's even like a Swedish phrase that translates roughly to something like "eat yourself into a pagan."
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that's like, and that's of course something that has specifically something to do with like Protestant Lutheran morals, right? You know, don't eat, don't overeat, and usurp resources and that kind of stuff. So that's kind of funny.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, the kind of the Christian, as you said, more Protestant kind of rigid, clean living values, or this kind of, you know, you get kind of I've seen it in comedy. For example, Billy Connolly, the Scottish comedian, he was describing the Irish, and he was saying, you know, there's something wrong with them and with us, and that there's still a pagan thing there. It's like this kind of waywardness, or, you know, this kind of lack of control. So I think that's it's an interesting cultural thing.
Yeah. I mean, because in so many ways this has also just become to mean uncivilized, right? And this is why it's, you know, applied to certain population groups that you feel like you can't control from some other perspective, right? Or, you know, indigenous peoples as well, and all of those things.
Of course, you have the Christian missions and the whole civilizing process, as it was called. You know, this goes hand in hand. That they viewed themselves, Christian missionaries, as civilizing people who were, you know, indigenous peoples, or people they view as somehow backward or ignorant. So yeah, this is.
It just seems like a negative term, and I don't know how many other people listen to this podcast are going to get this reference, but I've been hearing it a lot in modern songs. I listen to quite a bit of kind of UK grime, UK kind of drill music, and that for some reason it's become very popular in the last kind of few years to use pagan as a negative word against kind of the people that they're rapping about, or it's very much become something that's mentioned in almost every song. That kind of like the other is pagan. And maybe Shan.
Are those artists? Maybe. How many of them are Muslim?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure where it comes from. Maybe Shan could. I don't know if he can Google quickly. Maybe why, or what, in kind of like an urban sense, what pagan.
Because it's quite often like part of general Muslim terminology too. So
maybe, yeah. I mean, it's definitely
an influence from there.
Actually, I mean, like UK grime is obviously heavily influenced in sort of London area, which is a very multicultural space. But it is something that I pick up on. Almost every song has a reference to pagan, but it's very much a negative kind of calling somebody a pagan who's maybe done something wrong or that they don't like. And I just wondered, and I kind of guess I wondered where that came from, because it's certainly something I've only noticed in the last couple of years. And obviously, it probably does relate back to that negative kind of somebody who's a little bit.
That's really fascinating. Like, I want to do a study of that.
It's definitely there. I promise. I've not made it up. But yeah, maybe hopefully we can maybe look into it after and bring it up on one of the follow-up podcasts.
That's fascinating. I mean, I'm just thinking, you know, there's pagan metal, which is a synonym for folk metal. So either using traditional instruments or having lyrics about mythology or the old religions. So it's quite a positive meaning in the, you know, this reclaimed meanings of the word. But yeah, I didn't know that about grime music.
Shan's actually just popped a meaning into the chat, but it's scrolled up and I can't get it. I don't know if you
he,
can.
he wrote the grime artist called some grime artist, I guess, called the Prime Minister a pagan, spelled Paigon, a slang term for someone who is a fake, a liar, or betrays their friend. But it seems that some people didn't understand what Stormzy, this is the grime artist Stormzy, said, believed he used the word pagan or even pig. So
Maybe
okay,
maybe some misunderstanding that's kind of just
could
stuck
be.
around.
Yeah, I don't know. Jedi Mind Tricks talks a lot about pagans, and he's a Muslim rapper. So that's where I got the connection from. Like I've seen that with some of the American Muslim rappers. So
it was just an interesting thing when we started talking that it's something I've been hearing quite often. I've been like, where does that come from? So it just felt fitting to bring up. So Jenny, is there, because I guess Ireland, or certainly I know Ireland has been quite a religious country, certainly a very kind of Catholic country. So I guess I never really thought of it being big for paganism. Is there one that kind of stands out amongst the other kind of pagan religions as in popularity? And also, have you seen a big rise over recent years in paganism in Ireland?
So your first question about is there one kind of paganism? It's I don't do quantitative research.
Okay.
So I do ethnographic research where I interview people, like conversational style, and I analyze the interviews and I take part in rituals and festivals and so on. So I never know how many pagans there are.
Okay.
And we don't know from the census data or anything in the Irish context, but in terms of the types, it seems just, I can only kind of make observations, but it seems like there's as many Wiccans and witches as there are Druids, but people might associate Druidry more with Ireland, and with Britain and Ireland more, even though Wicca originated in England. So people have Celticized Wicca. They have there is a form of Wicca known as Celtic Wicca, and so if with claims to indigeneity, people sometimes look to Druids, or the what we can know about the religion of the Celts, which isn't very much at all.
Could I ask you to just give a brief rundown, like what is the difference between like Druidry and Wicca, and also perhaps witches in all of that? I think a lot of people tend to assume that Wicca and witches are just the same, or at least very closely associated. So I would love to hear sort of a little explanation for the differences.
Okay, so Druidry or Druidism is one form of paganism. So pagans often talk about paths, like for the type of paganism, and Druidry is a globalized form of paganism, but Druids are in Britain and Ireland. They're associated with the Celts. They're described as the priests of the Celts, and with academia there's debate about whether the Druids existed, or whether they were whether the things said about them are true, because it can't really be proven, because the Celtic peoples didn't keep any oral or they didn't keep any written text. So we're told that they followed an oral tradition, and that this was part of Druidry, a secret knowledge or esoteric kind of training that they did, but nobody knows why there's no extant or existing texts. So the things that are written about Druids are from Pliny, or from Greeks, and they're biased sources, and very few sources. So the Druids historically, as well as the Celts, images or ideas about the Celts have been very romanticized through different British and Irish artistic revivals. So in Ireland we had the Irish literary revival. They kind of romanticized the Celts and the landscape of Ireland. So modern Druidry as a practice would draw on spiritual ideas about the Druids and the Celts more broadly. But in the practice of it, at least in the Irish context, it's very similar to Wicca, with the actual rituals people do and the festivals that are celebrated. The wheel of the year, the 8 festivals are observed by most Wiccans and Druids, and with this other reclaimed word, witch, people self-identifying as witches in different religious contexts. There's many different kinds of modern day witchcraft, and in paganism there's a phrase, not all witches are pagan and not all pagans are witches. So there's many traditions that are separate from paganism, like Luciferian witchcraft, the satanic witchcraft, like with the Church of Satan and so on. And then there's within paganism, there's Wicca is probably the most well-known form of modern witchcraft. And then you also have it gets complicated with the names, but you have traditional witchcraft, or it might be just known as the craft. So in the Irish context, this would be things like traditional charms and cures, maybe healing traditions to do with the fairies or the other worlds, things that are found in historical traditions, and things that have continued into the modern day that might be classed as folklore, this kind of area. And then there's I'm just mentioning the problematic around the categorizations, because in America, for example, British traditional witchcraft means Wicca. So it gets a bit confusing. There's also what people call hereditary witchcraft, that they claim has been passed down through family lines, which would also have a lot of overlap between the traditional witchcraft that I mentioned. But these people might identify as pagans. And then Wicca was founded as a religion by Gerald Gardner in England in the 1940s, and then in the 50s, in 1951, when the Witchcraft Act was repealed in England, and Gerald Gardner went on TV, and it grew, especially in the 60s, and then spread to America and in particular and around the world. So Wicca is now a global religion, and as Professor Ronald Hutton said, it's we can look at it as the religion that England gave the world, and we have, as I mentioned, different forms of Wicca, and Wicca came to Ireland, as far as we know, in the 1970s, when the first Wiccan covens were formed from people who'd moved from England to Ireland. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's Wicca as a religion, right? It has its own theology that is, in so many senses been born out of Gerald Gardner's worldview, so to speak, right? But that's a major difference, I'd say. It's really interesting to see also that nowadays you have Christian witches, just like you have Christian neo-pagans, or not neo-pagans, sorry, New Agers, right? Like people whose framing of Christianity is New Age, in one way or other, right?
Yeah, there's also Christian Druids, because they'll say that what they're connecting with is like Celtic Christianity, or the early conversion, 5th century onward in Ireland. So there's that self-identification as well, or Christo-pagans who kind of merge things together. But in Ireland,
that sounds so insane to me. It's like, what? How can?
No,
I mean, I
it makes a lot of sense. I think it makes a lot of sense.
I guess what you're saying is that it's that they believe in a version that's older, or try to,
or simply if you have a polytheistic worldview, right? If your idea is that there are many gods out there and they're all legitimate, right? Then you can easily include Jesus, for instance, into that pantheon.
Yeah, but then at what point does it just stop being Christian and just becomes just being a pagan?
Like, probably stopped being Christian already when you had a bunch of other gods.
That's what I mean. So how can you be Christian, Druid, or like Christian and some other pagan religion in one? Like, where's that line?
Religion is a living thing, right? It's constantly changing and evolving with every generation. So, hey, man, Christianity will probably look very different in 500 years from what it is now. So,
I should say I don't include people who identify as Christo-pagans in my research, or this Christian Druids. But I'm guessing what they're doing is taking elements of magical practice and incorporating that into a Christian cosmology. But in Ireland, being the hegemonic or the dominant religion is Roman Catholicism, and if somebody practices magic, this is, according to Catholicism, this is heresy.
Mm-hmm.
It's blasphemy. So it's would automatically excommunicate you if you were to proclaim this, I suppose. So you couldn't be, at least in terms of theology, you couldn't be Catholic and practice witchcraft or self-identify as a witch, in a strict sense. So
I did not expect this to be so complicated. I mean, I know things are complicated. Everything on this podcast is complicated, but I just did not expect this, which is brilliant, because when I love when something happens that I just don't expect.
Well, it is very complicated, Dan, because I also research folk religion or popular religion, and in the Irish context, it's popular Catholicism, because it's the way things developed in Ireland. The Christianity absorbed these so-called pagan elements, and it continued, in things like pilgrimage tradition. There are a lot of rituals and things that people do that likely are not Christian, that have an older origin, but the people practicing that generally would regard themselves as Catholic, and so modern pagans, they often take those aspects. So, for example, circumambulating a holy well, this is a ritual action that's found in ancient Ireland, it likely goes back prior to Christianity, because according to Celtic scholars like Pruntius McCanna, in ancient India, there's also this ritual gesture of ritual action of a sacred stone or a well, going around it clockwise. So these things probably were absorbed into Christianity. So it is very complicated. It's a fluid thing.
I was just curious, does the Catholic Church not allow for any kind of magic? Because I mean, it's been a discussion in Christianity over its 2,000-year existence, right? What kind of witchcraft or magic is permissible or possible, and all that stuff. And I mean, there was once when there was at least the acceptance of divination, for instance, and is that completely out of the picture nowadays in I guess what we could call proper Catholic theology?
Well, I don't know what the Catholic Church's official stance would be, but I know that in Ireland, individual clerics, like local priests, for example, have taken issue with Reiki, because the energy healing and things that we might that might not be so threatening as somebody identifying as a witch, but I think it's I'm thinking more of in this example, I'm thinking more of like local priests rather than official kind of top-down views.
Yeah.
I was earlier, I was thinking of the definition of heresy and blasphemy. The practice of witchcraft would be and venerating pagan deities is not compatible with Christianity.
Yeah, I mean, we see it over here too. I've seen some instances of both Catholic and evangelical and other denominations, priests belonging to these denominations, like saying that yoga is blasphemy or unchristian and stuff like that. So yeah, it's still happening, and it's happening on local terms in different ways. In personally being Danish, what I'm used to is that the church in Denmark just like incorporates all of these things. Like you can find I'm pretty sure that there's a Lutheran priest in Denmark or two who definitely also do Reiki healing or something like that. Like it's an entirely different attitude that you see in the Danish National Church nowadays, with like they just incorporate anything, it seems like. So that's really fascinating.
When I was doing research, and I did a small scale research ethnographic project in Iceland on Huldafolk and elves as a comparative project to my research in Ireland on the She or fairies. You're wondering why I'm mentioning this, Matthias, but there's a legend that people told me in Iceland that the elves, that Iceland used to be Catholic, and that the elves remained Catholic, and that they have their own churches, while the rest of the human population converted to Lutheranism. So I thought that was quite interesting, that the elves have a different religion, or that they have a religion at all, that there are these elf churches. So this is, I haven't come across this in relation to fairies in Ireland, that they have churches.
If I was going to go to church, I'd want it to be an elf church.
No, you don't, man. If you hear those folk tales, you're in grave danger if you find yourself in an elf church.
No, they're all cute with pointy ears.
Yeah, they will try to kill you, though. That's always what happens in those stories.
I mean, I'll just flick them away, I feel. One question I have, and this might be ridiculous, but at what point does paganism become so synonymous with the pentagram? Because every book I ever see that just is like pagan or witch, it's always the pentagram. It's like it's just one and the same, and I can't imagine it has that much standing, I guess.
I think it's become the dominant symbol in a way, like the cross is for Christians. Many pagans wear the pentagram as a necklace or a ring, and it depends. Like the kinds of paganism I research would be like Druidry with other forms of witchcraft. So just there are other kinds. Just to say that the pentagram might not be important to those other types that I don't research, but for the ones I do, most people would recognize it as a significant symbol. So it has many meanings in the occult, Western esotericism, in different magical traditions. So for pagans, some of the main meanings the 5-pointed star. So I think it's a pentagram if it's etched on something, and then a pentacle if it's just the shape, you know,
Okay.
in a necklace or something. But it's it's earth, air, fire, and water, the 4 points, and then ether is the 5th point, which is the like spirit that encapsulates all of those elements of existence. So it connects to ancient philosophy. So these things that compose the universe, and the earth, air, fire, and water have many different magical correspondences, and also the compass directions. There are parallels with that. So when casting a circle,
sorry to just before I forget, but isn't there only 4 earth, fire, wind, and water, and only 4 sides to the compass? So why would they be with the pentagram, which is 5?
Because the 5th point is ether,
Okay.
or what people might call it, like the akashic level, or the spiritual energy, whatever is there.
Okay.
That's the metaphysical side of existence.
Yeah.
That's what. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
One question is that Aleister Crowley who popularizes the pentagram originally?
I think it comes from magical texts. I'm not sure actually.
No, this is really interesting because I don't remember having seen it in any of the. Of course, I deal with the Scandinavian area, and any of the Galdrabæk here from Iceland, for instance. I don't recall that it's particularly prevalent, if at all, even really written down there, and that's based off of Solomonic magic. So I was thinking, my assumption would be that it's probably in the Lemegeton or something like that, or but I can't really remember. It's probably there, of course. It's got to be there. I can't really remember that I have really seen it that often until Crowley shows up. So I was wondering if he was sort of like responsible for making it popular, and that's how it sort of like comes into contemporary culture through a remarkable individual like him.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, it's in many different magical systems, and yeah, I wrote something on it a long time ago, or answered a question where I looked up the history of it, but I can't remember now. I was saying earlier, my memory is not great. So, but in the practice of magic in paganism, it can mean different things. It can also be like a person standing with their arms outstretched and legs outstretched, the shape, like it can represent that. Or there are some references to the shape of or the path of Venus in the sky, but I think this is coming from Dan Brown's
I think that's the problem. You get so much.
There's so many influences.
Yeah, especially when it's picked up by the occult, it just gets spread. And the sad thing is, I think a lot of people that aren't in this world, kind of just the normies out there, that don't take a particular interest in this world. When they see the pentagram, I think a lot of them see like a satanic symbol just off the bat, and see something negative. And if they see it, it's kind of like, oh, somebody's been doing something nefarious here.
Horror films have used this,
absolutely,
and it is used as a satanic symbol as well. The Church of Satan have it with Baphomet in the center. The Satanic Temple, I think, use it as well. So it is also a satanic symbol. It's many different occult meanings, some of which overlap.
But I think equally, things like the Satanic Temple aren't necessarily what people think they are. They hear the term satanic in anything, and automatically it's that satanic panic of just but it's not. I actually kind of ask anyone to research what like Satanism actually is, and particularly like the Satanic Temple, and look into it before making any kind of judgment on it. There's a beautiful documentary called it's Hail Satan, and I think it was on Netflix, but it's out there somewhere, and they go into what the Satanic Temple do, and basically they just stand for not having the basic. I think it's that Christianity shouldn't be in certain buildings in America is their main point. That if you have the Ten Commandments up in a government building, then you should also be able to have Baphomet there. It shouldn't be religious based, and that's one of their main.
Yeah,
we have a distinct problem over here.
They're for equality, and they're against, child abuse, beating children in school, in Christian schools specifically. So any type of corporal punishment, and they support LGBTQ. So as you said, Dan, it's not what people react to the word Satan, and I find that with what I research, people react to the word witch. So when I'm explaining my research, especially, I don't mean to be ageist, but especially to the older generation, I'll start off with druidry, because they understand like there's kind of the image of the druid is more like a wizard or something benevolent. I
wonder if part of it almost sadly comes down to it being a druid. You kind of see a wise man, but a witch you see a haggard old lady with a crooked nose and someone a little bit crazy.
We've had 500 years of cultivating the myth of the pact with Satan and the Sabbath and all of that stuff. I mean, all of that stuff comes from late medieval France and southwestern Germany, right? And then gets synthesized in the Malleus Maleficarum as a book on scary witches out there. And then, for the next 100 years, 150 years approximately, depending on where we are, right? We have these different witch processes that we often refer to as witch crazes. And they all revolve around the learned population in an area having adopted these ideas about an alternative society of primarily females, mostly, except for Finland and Iceland, where we have curious different perspective on that. But most places in Europe, and also in the locations in America where this takes place, like Salem, for instance, it's usually attached to women as the alternative society that is then governed by this goat man, and that's all subversive and supposed to take down good Christian society. That's a myth that has existed ever since. Pops up again and again in Western history, and the most latest version of it was the Satanic Panic, that had real dire consequences for people who went to jail accused of crimes that they never did, and such things, because they were into heavy metal and drew pentagrams on stuff in the 80s. So yeah, that's a real part of our very recent history. It's so bizarre.
West Memphis 3, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, one of them, I can't remember his name. What was his name? The guy who's written a book called High Magic. Can't remember his name. It's a really fascinating tale of how magic and practicing magic and witchcraft actually kept him sane through his jail time, right?
This is where we see if Shan's worth his money, and he pops up in the chat with the the author. No, it's the whole Satanic Panic thing is absolutely insane.
And like in my research, I interview people, and some of the people, especially people who would have spread from this Satanic Panic spread from America to the UK, particularly England, and a school teacher in England lost his job for being pagan, and he was fired. It was just like, as soon as they heard witch. So like some of the people I've interviewed would be old enough to remember that time, when it wasn't safe to say that you're pagan. And then like it was also accusations of that they're a cult. So many of the people that I've interviewed talked about, when they founded their coven, particularly witchcraft, more than druidry. When they formed a coven, they were very conscious of this, that everyone should be over 18, and if someone contacted them, they would dissuade them, because of this fear of being accused of being a cult or brainwashing people, or just the kind of general society. So you asked me earlier, Dan, and I didn't answer it about so I went off on a tangent about the kind of the growth of paganism. And I found that since I started my research in 2002, I started doing field work. And since then, in Ireland, but I think other places as well, the profile of paganism is much higher. People generally know what paganism is now. And in Ireland, that's partly because we had a situation with one of our ancient sites, the Hill of Tara in County Meath. There was a plan for a motorway that potentially would damage this site and go quite close to it, and pagans led protests at the start and did direct action on the site, and then there were also many other protests as well. But people heard from the media what paganism is, that it's a religion in the modern day, and what pagans do. So even though some of the media portrayals were quite mocking, some of the journalists we have in Ireland like to make fun of what they don't understand. But
that's journalists
even so,
anyway.
Yeah, but even so, people heard something about pagans, and that pagans were protesting about this site that they regard as a sacred site. So even I've just anecdotally from talking to people, even religious witchcraft, people seem more aware that there are people who practice witchcraft, and it's not evil or scary. So I think that's also changing.
I think it's a little bit of a mixed bag over here, and depending on where you are in the US. I mean, it's also a pretty big country, so but mostly I think it's a similar thing. People generally know what it is, that it's not, scary or problematic, or, weird baby sacrificing satanic cults like they thought back in the 80s. There's still some people out there who probably think that. But I think generally...
I know, Mathias, because I have a YouTube channel, and I get death threats sometimes from evangelical Christians. So.
Oh, great. Oh, wow.
Shout out the YouTube channel. What's the YouTube channel called?
It's just if you search my name, I think I just have it, Jenny Butler.
Yeah, go subscribe to that.
Yeah, go subscribe and tell those evangelicals to fuck off.
Yeah, there's crazy people all over the world in everything. It's insane. And I mean, you said earlier about somebody losing their job because they're pagan, which is absolutely insane. And you just could not imagine that now. Even in my lifetime, I can feel that there is a difference in opinion around this kind of stuff. But I still think that whilst maybe you wouldn't be attacked for being pagan, or there's some people would still kind of sneer or kind of look at, certainly I think the word witch, I think people would still maybe struggle understanding or accepting that. Certainly people who aren't kind of, again, in this world, they would kind of hear witch and think, oh, what's that? You think you can do magic?
But I think it more gravitates to, like, don't take them seriously than, these people are evil, right?
Yeah, that's it.
So that's a big difference.
It's more kind of like a laughable thing rather than and I'm going to attack because it's dangerous. But it still should just be. I mean, people can do what the fuck they want with anyway. Who cares? Too many people care about what other people are doing.
Yeah, it's a thing.
Yeah, I mean,
Oh, I want to like just to connect this to how things have developed in Denmark with all of this stuff, because this is really kind of fascinating. Like in Denmark nowadays, there's one of the sort of like a media personality is like a well-known Ausatru or pagan or neo-pagan, whatever word we use here, who is like involved in doing exhibits at the National Museum, and now he's like working on another museum. And you can, there's a lot of things you could perhaps say about the fact that this, lay person who does not have a degree in anything is involved, but I think it speaks to how accepting that society has come of these things. It's very much at the inner circle of cultural institutions and politics, even to some degree.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean,
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just thinking when you said about the museum a few years ago in Ireland, the Irish Museum of Modern Art had an exhibition called As Above, So Below, where they displayed different artworks, including Kenneth Anger's some stills from his films, but also practitioners of Wicca, some Athames, and different objects used for divination and magical practice. So, just the recognition in that kind of cultural setting, that's, as you said, it's also a political change to be able to curate that kind of exhibition.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And the same thing we see it in Iceland too. Iceland, also too, I feel like it's very like involved with the cultural elite in different ways. I mean, Hilmar Hilmarsson, who was the Allsherjargoði, he's a well-known musician, and if I remember correctly, he even did stuff with Björk back in the 90s, early 90s, late 80s or something like that. So like that, also speaks to, a lot of recognition in a place like that. I don't know what the status is in like Norway and in Sweden for that matter, though. Might look a little different over there.
In Ireland, there's also a good few pagan tour guides, and some of them are openly pagan. They also tell people something about paganism if they want to know, but at many of those sites that would be sacred to pagans, it's interesting that the tour guides sometimes they're pagans themselves. So
yeah, wasn't there something in Scotland recently of something that had to do with the recognition of the witches that were burned during the crazes up there? What do you remember what that was all about?
I know there's been memorials, like statues put up, and I'm trying to think of the name of this project. I follow it on Twitter. Yeah, it's about the official recognition. So we had some. The name escapes me now, but in Ireland,
this is Shan's chance to redeem himself. So
see if we can find it.
Yeah,
but yeah, that's right. There was a memorial. I follow the very interesting Museum of Witchcraft that they have there in Scotland. That's I need to go there.
There's a museum in Cornwall, in Boscastle.
Yeah.
The museum.
Am I getting the
Museum of Witchcraft, and there might be another one in Scotland. I'm not sure. But the more well-known one is in Boscastle. Okay,
yeah. I might.
And I know not too far from me. There's obviously Pendle Hill, which was very much a site of was this 6, 7 people killed? You may remember better than I do. But that was definitely a site of sort of witches being killed, or people being accused of being witches and then hung.
Yeah.
Oh, it's planned. The museum. I feel like I'm following something that has to do with that on Instagram somewhere. But I might be mixing them up with Cornwall because
So
there's no difference between the north and the south of the British Isles.
There may be something planned as part of that project in Scotland. Yeah. I'm not sure.
So Shan said it's it's a memorial to Maggie Wall.
Maggie Wall, yeah.
Maggie Wall, who was said to be burnt here in 1657 as a witch, which is insane. So that's where they've put a monument up. Yeah.
There's a couple of things going on in Scotland. There's a couple of news articles out there about creating a museum for witchcraft.
I mean, that would be a fun museum. No matter what you think, it's just a fun topic. I think, like, especially the occult things are so interesting. I just want to point out Frederick just had a good point in the chat, and we need to stop mentioning Frederick because people are going to think that he's our only listener that sits in, because we just mention him like every week. People always say he's just Frederick sat in the chat on his own every week, just shouting stuff at us. But anybody, if you do want to join into the live chat, just if you go over to our Patreon, Patreon Nordic Mythology Podcast, you can join the live chat every week and shout at us along with Frederick. But what he said was, how people are so accepting of kind of the Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Islam, Christianity, and they're very much accepted as, whether you believe in them or not, they're accepted as being there, and it's understood that people believe in them, and you kind of go, okay, you believe them or you don't. But then for some reason, some people have this kind of weird idea of suddenly when you introduce pagan and this idea of other gods, that's now ridiculous. When in the reality, it's not different. You're just adding other gods into it rather than saying one God created the world in 7 days, whatever else. Like, you're now just putting in a different context with other gods. But for some reason, that leap to some people, it's like, oh, well, I can understand that people believe in this, but that is just fucking insane. And that's quite an odd balance. I never thought of it like that. That you can kind of certainly some people will go, oh, that's acceptable, but 2 gods? No, fuck off. It's like
3, 4, 5, 700. Oh shit, no, you can't do that, man.
Yeah, it's like this
except
point.
Of course, if you're in India, then it's typically also from the Western perspective, it's acceptable in India, but don't bring it here because that's weird. I don't know how this works for people, but
well, I mean, people who take the Bible literally, God says in the Bible, "Thou shalt have no other God before me." But if there are no other gods, then it wouldn't, why would that be there?
That's it. Ooh,
that is because it's the devil that's misleading.
One might say.
Yeah, well, I have these opinions. My favorite one has always been the idea of God being omnipotent and omnipresent, which if he truly is, then that means that he has to allow every negative thing that ever happens in the earth, because he has to be there and allow it to happen. So therefore, God is just a massive dickhead because he has to allow these things to happen. So if he truly is, then he's just a shit person. On that note, Jenny, I have to ask you about St. Patrick, because that's one thing I see every year when St. Patrick's Days come around. I always see a bunch of memes about him kicking the snakes out of Ireland, and those snakes meaning the pagans. And is it an idea of Christianity coming to Ireland and the slaughter of pagans? Am I right in that?
Well, it seems to be that the legend represents Christianity overcoming paganism, and we can understand these stories in different ways. But Saint Patrick is often in stories as Christianity itself, and then in later times there are legends where it's a priest or a bishop is representing Christianity in the story. So it seems to be that's at least one of the ways we can understand these tales. But yeah, the legend of the serpents, I think, was attached to St. Patrick in the 12th century. So these are, you know, retrospective kind of coded ways of talking about, or likely code, you know, ways of talking about the Christianization of the country. And often serpents have many esoteric meanings. So they shed their skin so they can represent immortal, you know, kind of renewal or spiritual transformation. And then you have the Ouroboros, the serpent eating its own tail, this circle, which is sometimes a snake, sometimes a dragon. And in medieval times, then you have like giant worms, serpents, dragons. These become synonymous, and it's often what the saint, you know, fights or defeats and represents something, some ill of in society. So, you know, Saint George and the dragon. You have these lots of different stories like that. So the serpent, of course, in the biblical story, comes to represent something very bad, and something sneaky or misleading. So there's possible influences coming from ancient religions, like you have the Sumerian Enki, who is associated with the serpent symbol, and you have the Quetzalcoatl in South America, the plumed serpent, the feathered serpent god. So it may be that, you know, these influences on the symbol of the serpent then come to represent paganism, or the old religions themselves. So yeah, a lot of
snakes.
Yeah,
like
a lot of
got a bad rap. Go on, carry on. Sorry.
Yeah, they do get a bad rap, and when you look at different ancient culture and around the world, the serpent or snakes often have to do with healing, either in a symbolic way or snake charming, or, you know, this is even the symbol of the caduceus, the entwined serpents. This is still on pharmacies in most countries. Sometimes they even still have the snake heads. So this still represents healing. It's just maybe a thwarting of that meaning to make it something quite negative.
I wonder why is that? Why do we get it as a healing thing, but also then an evil, negative thing as well?
Well, nobody knows, but possibly, you know, the so-called pagan cultures that were powerful and strong. If this symbol, you know, symbols like you also have the, well, I'll come back to that because it's confusing, but symbols of power possibly were manipulated into something to mean the opposite. So often, you know, with like you can see it in politics today, or bullying of somebody. Often it's the perpetrator of something that will accuse someone of doing what they're doing. So symbols can sometimes be made into the opposite meaning.
Okay.
I don't know if I'm making sense.
No, you are.
No,
you are.
I mean, so well, of course, the Asclepius rod, right, with the serpents around it. That's an old Greek symbol that was, you know, attached to healing, which it still is. And that's, of course, also because Greek literature and Greek learning, Greek philosophy, and all these things had this important special status in Christianity too. A lot of it got to live on because the Christians were like, well, yeah, sure, these guys were pagan, but they figured stuff out. So let's not just throw the baby out with the bathwater. There were some, like Tertullian and such, who wanted to get rid of it, but thankfully they stopped that. So that's one of the reasons that there's still a pagan legacy in all of Europe, right? Some of that literature was preserved by Christians, right? That's one of the things I think contemporary pagans might forget once in a while. And then you have, of course, also the Christianized stories around snakes and dragons, right? Where it represents some kind of evil. It sometimes, you know, reflects directly the evil of hell, and so on. A very common folktale in Scandinavia is the story about the dragon that comes and lies around a church, and then you have to foster a bull to fight it, so that people can get back into the church, right? And this is again like a, you know, story about good and evil and all that stuff. It's a very, very common story, and of course, I think mostly it's Saint George and the Dragon, or Saint Michael and the Dragon. That's in people's minds here when these stories are being retold. Circling back to this subject of like, thanks to the Christians, we have a lot of, you know, pagan stories still available to us. Jenny, I wanted to ask you, what source material, historical source material, can an Irish pagan use? Like what do we usually see contemporary Irish pagans use, and how do they use it to sort of understand the history of paganism in Ireland? So
you say thanks to the Christians, and it is thanks to the Christians for writing this material down in the Irish context and in other contexts. But of course, on the other side of that, they destroyed these older cultures and religions. So nobody knows why they wrote this stuff down. But the main source for contemporary pagans is the early Irish literature. So we call this mythology. This is, you know, by academics, it's synonymously called the mythology or the early Irish literature. You know, I often think the term mythology, if you go back far enough, it's religion, of course. So, but people often mean the written material as opposed to the oral material or folklore. When they say mythology, they usually mean texts. So we have this corpus or collection of medieval texts. So from, you know, there's 5th century. There's much later texts that refer back to St. Patrick, for example, and there's like literature that's supposed to have been St. Patrick's own writings, the Confessio, which has a lot of pagan themes, like transforming into deer and things like that. But it's the kind of 11th century, I think, contains a lot of the names for gods and stories about the other world, or Tir na Og. There's different names. Tir na Og, the land of youth. So the other world of Irish tradition is mentioned. It's not described in that much detail. So names of gods and stories of heroes, and the she. So this word she or sheath, it might have been in Old Irish, then is becomes synonymous with the word fairy. But this is the main source, and of course it was compiled by Christians. So it's the stories, the information was modified, and it's hard to tell the extent that it's been changed, because some of the stories have Christian elements to them, or it's likely that these Christian scribes downplayed the power of deities and things like that. So yeah, and it was also compiled, you know, hundreds of years after the pagan world was gone. So there's many gaps in knowledge, and so this is one source. And then there's archaeology is also archaeological knowledge of sites and the, you know, Celtic practices, even though there's very little known about the precise rituals, for example. But there would be things like references to votive offerings in in rivers and sites which are like some of the sites I mentioned, the Hill of Tara, which is in County Meath. There's also Newgrange in County Meath, and many sacred hills. But the sites, like those ones I've just mentioned, and also megalithic monuments, these like stone circles, standing stones, these are pre-Celtic sites, and nobody knows who built them or what exactly they mean. So there's many different archaeological theories, but it's very complex when it comes to identity and religious practices and the spiritual connection, because especially the romanticization of the Celts has had a huge influence on the development of contemporary paganism. So that's there, but also these pre-Celtic sites, and also the mythology refers to pre-Celtic peoples, mythic peoples. So yeah.
Oh, you
So
mentioned
it's an interesting mixed bag, I'd say.
You mentioned stone monoliths, and they fascinate me because I think automatically some people, when you think of pagan, you think of kind of not certainly in like an old historical sense, maybe uneducated. You think of a lot of people kind of see Christianity as bringing the education, and pagans as kind of these more primitive people. But some of the monoliths, like, I do not know how they were created. We were in North Yorkshire, and I cannot remember. I took a picture of it. I know where it is if I look it up. But we were just driving back and came past a church with a giant stone obelisk in the ground, and it must have been 50 foot tall. I don't know, maybe something like that. It was as high as like an average kind of house. And so I saw it from the car and said I wanted to pull over and go and have a look at it, because it was that kind of outstanding. I was like, what the fuck is that? Why is that there? And had like a little plaque saying they dragged this thing. I think it was like 50 miles or something, 40 miles from the sea, from where the stone originated to there, and then erected it. And however far it was in the air, it was maybe like another quarter underground to obviously keep it upright. And just there's a picture of me stood next to it, and it's how did anybody ever get that there without modern technology? And it's the same things with like Stonehenge. There's a bunch of them all over the place, and they are just so fascinating. And I know some people kind of go, oh yeah, well, they just put logs underneath it and dragged it. But
you want the magic, damn it.
but no, but I like, fair enough. But even that's just a lot of effort. Like, even like people say, oh, they just put logs under it and dragged it. Like, yeah, okay, maybe, but then why? There has to be some reason it's that significant, because it's not an easy thing to do, even if it's like, yeah, this is how they did it, but it's still not easy. So there has to be some huge significant reason why they want to do that.
Yeah, I mean, usually you do those kinds of huge gestures to the universe, so to speak, to because it is significant, right? There's some significance to transporting a heavy object like that from A to B and then raise it over there, and that in itself, can be, a ritual act. The labor that is put into all of that I'm sure that also went into the ideas of like building the pyramids, like, using all of this labor. Because think about it, we're talking about societies where a lot of activity has to do with your primary need for sustenance, right? So if you can allocate resources to such a major undertaking, you're also demonstrating, especially if you believe in gods, right, that you're blessed by these gods, right? Because you have so much surplus that you can, you know, allocate a bunch of dudes and dudettes, I'm sure, to go over there and pick that stone up and then move it over here, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh,
Like
hear
that.
me out. Maybe lost civilization of aliens.
Oh, fuck off.
But no, haven't, I could be completely wrong on this, but I'm sure I read somewhere that haven't they just found a missing link in human history? Like, obviously we have like Homo sapiens and all the different steps. Haven't they just found the one piece that was missing? And
Alien?
no, it's not an alien. It's just a type of, like, obviously we have like Neanderthals, and there's one that was missing to complete the steps of evolution, and I'm sure it's just been found. But it kind of,
I did see something about a new species that walks strange.
Yeah, but I'm sure it contradicts a lot of history, and or at least our understanding of time, of what we knew and when we think people knew it. Which I think we've got it all kind of mixed up. I think it's very arrogant of us to think that we just know the times of everything and what people knew when they knew it. We're always kind of learning, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, like one of our main problems with the history of evolution is that it's you know, it comes about in a time period where people then are like, well, let's use this for racism. And so, you know, we go down this rabbit hole of you know, thinking about hierarchies when it comes to all kinds of species, but of course also applied to humans. So that's why, you know, there's like this myth about Neanderthals being, you know, these stupid brutes, where, you know, the more that, you know, modern science investigates them, they find out that they were pretty sophisticated human beings, really, right? Which, you know, also, I guess, explains why the, you know, everybody from the Eurasian continents have a dash of Neanderthal in them, right? There's a possibility of that.
I have more than a dash of Neanderthal.
I think you do, yes.
I think, yeah.
But so do the Scandinavians. We're pretty Neanderthal-y. Nothing else, yeah. So
there we go. Should we wrap this one up?
Sure thing.
Jenny, you're still muted. I didn't know if you realized. I saw you coughing.
Yeah.
No, I know we wanted to talk fairies.
Ruined it now. I thought I got away with muting myself while I coughed.
Oh, I'm gonna out you. Don't worry. No, we you know, we were going to talk about fairies and folklore, but to us, I really enjoyed this episode. I love these conversations. They're just very kind of free flowing, and you know, they go wherever. And I feel like I've learned a lot as well. So if you're happy, let's book you to come back sometime in the new year, and then let's donate an episode to fairies and the folklore side of things, rather than just trying to cram it in now in like a few sort of 10 minutes. It doesn't do justice.
Yeah, I think there'll be more connections directly with Nordic mythology and culture with fairy stuff.
I mean, honestly, I don't know why people have such a, you know, strong tendency to make distinctions between what happens in the British Isles and what happens in Scandinavia. It's like, there's a lot of overlap, people. A lot of overlap.
There's Britain and there's Ireland. I've stopped using the term British Isles. Like, people use it in Ireland and they say it's a geographical term, but it's not. It's a colonial term. So I'm not having a go at you, Mathias. I'm just saying.
That's a good point to make. That's a good point to make.
Oh, but I mean,
for correcting me.
I think to anybody outside, certainly I found listening to sort of podcasts and reading things that in the US, they seem to really struggle understanding our very complicated geographical names for things, because obviously we have Britain is one thing, then the UK is another thing. But Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, which is attached to Northern Ireland, is its own thing and isn't anything to do with the UK at all. So it does get quite complicated. So I think a lot of people struggle.
I mean, it's the same with, Scandinavia and the North Atlantic, whatever you want to call that. I'm lazy. I just call it all Scandinavia. So that's my that's my approach to it.
It's called the UK because it's the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. So that's why it's the UK, to encompass Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
But people say the UK when they mean Britain, so it's hard. It's complicated. Yeah.
It is complicated because Great Britain doesn't include Northern Ireland. So Great Britain is England, Scotland, and Wales.
No,
and
you're
then,
just making shit up. Come on.
See, this is my point.
It's like when Danes and Swedes, they're like, oh, we're so very different. It's like, no, you're not. You all look the same anyway.
Britain has a very complex old history. And I know at some point it's all kind of got changed with people leaving and moving and whatever else. But obviously, Britain, to hopefully clear this up for people out there who aren't from here, Britain is England, Scotland, and Wales. United Kingdom then brings in Northern Ireland. I guess originally would it have included the whole of Ireland until the separation?
Yeah, so Britain colonized Ireland and would have called Ireland British.
But it wouldn't be the United Kingdom, right? Because that's after, yeah.
Yeah, it's a political designation.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you're totally right. It's not the British Isles. There's just one British Isle, I guess.
Yeah. No, that's it. So Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, is its own separate country. But I guess you must get so many people that just automatically band it in with the UK.
Yeah, often like people don't really they don't think about it or yeah. So
No.
the safest thing to say is the island of Ireland. This won't upset anyone.
Yeah, that's it. It is because I can fully understand why people in the Republic of Ireland would be like, oh, hang on a minute, we're not part of that. We're our own country. We're part of the EU. It's just a separate country. It's just we
didn't fuck up like the English and did the whole Brexit thing.
It is just a whole different country. So it's almost like people have been, oh yeah, Belgium's just French. That's pretty much what the same thing. It's like, oh, Belgium's just part of France. They're just calling all Belgians French when that's just not what it is. But
yeah, we're coming into the commemoration of the foundation of the Irish state next year. So 1922. With Ireland as a nation state was founded.
There we go.
Congratulations for that one.
You escaped. So the others have been trying for so long to escape, but I think England somehow just keeps clawing them in.
Dude,
when we
need to let go.
when we come back to talk about fairy lore, there's really interesting parallels, but also regional differences. Like with England, you have a lot shared between Scotland and Ireland with Gaelic, Gaelic culture, and what this has to do with like the otherworldly. So I'm really interested in like the different influences on England, especially when it comes to things like otherworldly beings. So there's of course much that's shared culturally when people move around, and we can also see that between Ireland and Iceland. So hopefully we can have a chat about things like that.
Oh, we will.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And
even also, extend it to mainland Scandinavia, because there are fascinating commonalities and also very great differences at the same time. It's really, really interesting.
Yeah, no, I've thoroughly enjoyed this. This has been a lot of fun. Jenny, do you want to let people know where they can find you? I guess if they want to, I don't know how public you are with your work or on social media or anything like that? And also
Yeah,
where people can find your work.
Yeah, so I have a website, Dr. Jenny, it's like Dr. like drjennybutler.com. And on Twitter at Dr. Jenny Butler. And I'm on Instagram, Spiral-Eyed Girl, but there's some underscores. But I think I have I think I have everything on my linked to my website, I think. And what else am I? I have a Facebook page that people can follow. If you just search for my name and Paganism, it should come up.
We'll make Shannon his money and find all those links and put them in the show notes. I feel like I sound like I'm very bitter about paying Shan, which I'm not, because I've mentioned it quite a few times. This episode, it just so happened to come up. Shan does an amazing job, and he's not going anywhere if he ever even wants to. He's stuck for life. Oh,
they're already in the chat.
Yeah,
he's already found the website,
and he's saying "bitch, please." So there you go.
Oh, sassy Shan.
That was very fast, Shan.
It was fast.
Matthias, my YouTube channel's in there as well. So yeah, thanks.
There we go. Yeah, Matthias, where can people find you?
You can find me on Instagram.
There we go. Matthias, not on
Instagram. You should also, of course, go check out our Patreon for the podcast. I'm trying to help Dan out here. If you get on the Patreon, you get special access to bonus episodes and a bunch of other fun things. We have new plans in the works for the next year. New great ideas. So stay tuned for that stuff.
Yeah, we're going to look at adding some new bonus stuff on the Patreon. Again, you get, regardless of any tier that you join, you get a bonus episode every week. So you get the main show for free, but you get if you want to hear more of us, you get an extra show every week. If you sign up to the Patreon, you get access to the live show. You can watch the episodes live. You get the video episodes before everybody else. You get ad-free episodes. So there's a bunch of stuff on there. You get there's also some discounts off Horns of Odin as well. So yeah, just go check it out. You can cancel it at any point if you want. You can literally, if you wanted, you could sign up for a month, listen to all the storytime episodes, and then cancel if you didn't enjoy it. So yeah, just go and have a look. It's really worth it, and it helps us out, helps us keep growing, and it helps us pay Shan. That's the main thing. It helps pay Shan. Because we would be fucked without him, as much as we say we would, because we do not know how to make this whole thing run without him.
Yeah, and we also need somebody to, take me down a notch once in a while.
Yeah, both of us. So if you want to follow me, it's Daniel_Farron1 on Instagram. Obviously, Horns of Odin on Instagram, and then just Nordic Mythology Podcast across the board on Instagram, Facebook, website, and the YouTube channel, and that's it. I think that's the show.
Did you remember to tell people to give us a 5-star rating?
Oh, I didn't. If you enjoy the show, leave us a 5-star rating, a positive review, preferably on iTunes. Like I say, it helps us bump up. Helps us. I think we've got 290 something 5-star reviews now, which is nice.
Yeah, that's nice.
And
it's only 5 stars or 1 star. So
yeah, we only tend to get 5 or 1s, and the 1s always tend to be people complaining about sound issues in the early episodes, which is
I forgot to make some weird noises that could be edited out later.
I know you muted yourself.
We will add some, in the post production.
Sorry, Matthias's dog did it for everybody.
Oh yeah, it was. I don't know what it was barking at this time.
Oh, it's all right. Just needs a cuddle.
She's had it in for the neighbors lately. Like the neighbors up the hill, is constantly staring at them and barking. And I never see them out there, so I don't know what's going on. But
hey, you want to make sure you keep an eye on the neighbors then, because dogs have a sense of these things. They understand and they know. Could be aliens.
Or the new Pendle Hill. You don't know what's going on up there.
That's it. Yeah, Pendle Hill is definitely an interesting one. Let's wrap this up. Thank you very much, Jenny.